Good day everyone. I am Jason Clover G.T. Silva and this is African Literature. Africa's culture encompasses and includes all culture found in the African continent. There is a political or racial divide between North and Sub-Saharan Africa, which is further divided into a variety of ethnic cultures. African cultures are diverse and varied, not statistic, and have been influenced by both internal and external forces as the rest of the world. Historical overview. The Africa's cultural recognition has also been an essential component of the continent's post-independence national building, in the recognition of the need to harness African cultural resources to enrich the individual process, necessitating the creation of the enabled environment in a variety of ways. In recent years, there has been a growing call for a greater emphasis on the cultural dimension in all aspects of development. Africa is home to a multitude of tribes, ethnics, and social groups, some of which have very large population numbering in the millions, while others have population numbering in the thousands. Some countries have over 20 different ethnic groups, as well as wide range of religious beliefs. Some facts about Africa. Africa is the world's second largest continent. Africa is the world's largest continent, which is total of area approximately of 1.73 million square meters, accounting for 5.7% of the Earth's surface and 20% of the total land surface on our planet. North Africa, East Africa, Central Africa, Southern Africa, and West Africa are the five subsections. Africa has between 1,500 and 2,000 languages. There are at least 3,000 distinct ethnic groups in Africa, and approximately 2,000 different languages are spoken, each with its own dialect. While Arabic is the most widely spoken language on the African continent, it is followed by English, Swahili, and French. The world's longest river originates in Africa. The Nile River is the world's longest river, stretching 4,258 miles and passing through 11 countries: Tanzania, Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Kenya, Ethiopia, Eritrea, South Sudan, and Egypt. The world's oldest university is located in Africa. The University of Kairouan was founded in 859 AD by Fatima al-Fihri in Fez, Morocco, and was originally a madrasa. The University of Bologna, Italy, was founded in 1088 and it is the oldest in Europe. The richest man in the history is African. Mansa Musa, also known as the Musa I of Mali, is regarded as one of the wealthiest men in history. Musa was the 10th emperor of the Mole Empire, one of the prosperous Salian kingdom that arose along the Saharan slave trade routes during the late medieval period. Africa has the world's largest hottest desert, the Sahara, world's biggest hottest desert, which is one of the world's harshest environment. It is the third largest desert in the world, after Antarctica and the Arctic, both of which are called deserts. At 3.6 million square meters, it is larger than the entire United States of America. 11 countries are covered by the desert. Large section of Algeria, Chad, Egypt, Libya, Mali, Mauritania, Morocco, Niger, Western Sahara, Sudan, and Tunisia. Africa has the world's largest, tallest, and fastest animals. The African elephant is the world's biggest land animal, and the giraffe is the world's tallest animal. Male giraffes can grow to be 6 meters tall, while the females can grow to be 4 meters tall, and the fastest was the cheetah. And the world's Team Resort Hotel in Africa was found. The Palace of the Lost City, located in South Africa, is the world's largest team resort. Africa has the highest wildlife immigration on Earth. The Serengeti of the Tanzania hosts the world's biggest wildlife migration, with over 750,000 zebras, leading to 1.2 million wild beasts across incredibly landscape. So for example, the endless plains of the Serengeti National Park are home of the world's oldest ecosystem. African literature has traditional oral and written literature in Afro-Asian and African languages, as well as works composed in European language by Africans. Traditional written literature is the most representative of those sub-Saharan societies that have engaged in Mediterranean cultures, as it is restricted to a narrower geographic region than oral literature. Scholars in which is now northern Nigeria has developed written literature in both Hausa and Arabic, while the Somali people have produced traditional written literature. There are additional writing in Greek, which is the Ethiopic and Amharic, two Ethiopian language. Ethiopia is the only country in Africa where Christianity has been practiced for long enough to be termed traditional. This major of works published in European language originated from the 20th century forward. A separate article, South African literature, covers the literature of South Africa in English and Afrikaans. The relationship between oral and written tradition, and especially between oral and the current written literature is complicated and not just evolutionary. Modern African literature arose the colonialism of educational systems, which were based on European models rather than indigenous African tradition. However, these literatures were influenced by African oral traditions.
Oral traditions. The nature of storytelling. When the storyteller talks, time stops and the listener is in the presence of history. The present reality is here, but it is framed by intense emotional imagery. This is the skill of the storyteller to obscure the past, making it enigmatic and unreachable. It is, however, just inaccessible to one's current intellect. It is always accessible to one's heart and soul, as well as one's emotions. The storyteller merges the audience's current walking state with its previous semi-conscious state, and the audience is transported back in time, joining its forefathers. And history, which is always more than an academic subject, becomes a collapse of time for the audience. History becomes a way of revisiting an uncertain and extremely obscure past for the spectator. So here are the examples pictures of the nature of storytelling. Storytelling is a sensory union of image and concept, a process of recreating the past in terms of the present, in which the storyteller utilizes realistic imagery to depict the present and imaginative image to conjure and embody the content of a culture's historical experience. This old fantasy pictures are both the culture's inheritance and the storyteller's bounty. They contain the culture's emotional history, its most profoundly felt yearnings and anxieties, and so have the power to evoke intense emotional responses from audience members. Stories are about transformations, legendary transformations of the cosmos, heroic changes of society, and personal transformations. The storytelling experience is always ritualistic, always a night of passage, or relives the past and gains insight into current life in the process. Might as both a narrative and a structural construct the storytellers employ. It is a narrative about transformations at the dawn of time, with gods as the main protagonist. It is a both material and approach as a storytelling tool for the constructions of metaphor, the heroic epic. Like the story involves in the framework of myth. A metaphor is a at the heart of each of these genres, and the needle, along with its companion proverb, is at the heart of metaphor. Each of these vocal forms has a metaphorical process that is the product of structured imagery. The specificities of the African's experience are entered in these universal creative traditions. Heroic poetry. In epic poetry or panegyric, the most obvious relationship between lyric and image occurs. Panegyric, like story, lyric, riddle, and proverb, is based on metaphor. Although the metaphorical connections are sometimes vague, history is more obvious in panegyric. But it is still fragmented history, rebuilt according to the bard's lyrical goals, animated images, for example, are frequently utilized to draw clear symbolic connections between historical characters or events. The fantastical qualities of this form of poetry may be seen in the metaphorical mixing of the real and the animal in these constructions. Within this metaphorical setting, the hero is described and assessed in panegyric, like in other kinds of oral traditions. Emotions, tied to both historical and non historical images, are at the heart of a meaning. The lyrical rhythm of a panegyric helps to shape such sentiments. As a result of this process, history is repressed and given new meaning in the context of current experience. It's a twofold process. History is being rewritten at the same time that current events are being formed. Incorporates several sometimes unconnected stories, the metaphorical machinery, the governing mechanism found in riddles and lyric, the proverb and heroic property to create a bigger story. All this revolves on the hero's character and the progressive disclosure of this vulnerability, insecurities, and torments. The frequently dies or is greatly disturbed in the process of ushering the culture into a new dispensation, which is often foreshadowed by his resurrections or coming into knowledge. The legendary metamorphoses wrought by creator gods and culture heroes is perfectly replicated in the hero's deeds and cyclical torturous motions. A genealogical system might serve as the basis for an epic, which pieces of it being expanded and expanded into a story. The epic, like heroic poetry, has historical allusions, like as place names and events, although they are not as totally developed. They are based on fabricated narrative rather than history when they are founded in an epic. The fictional narrative links is a historical event, person, or location to the people's cultural past. In an oral civilization, history, the epic poem, and creative fictions are two oral genres. the tale, the epic connection the two by weaving the historical event into the magical fiction. Myth can be included in epics, with a focus on origins. The epic weaves together a tale, heroic poetry, history, and mythology. The epic revolves on a single historical or non-historical character as a tribute to to the plot, which occasionally focuses on a significant but always non-historical individual. The epic, powered by the same engine, which is made up of riddle, lyric, and aphorism.
Hello guys, I'm Aaron Joshua J. Maandal from BSCS2E, and now at this point in time we are going to discuss about the oral traditions and the written word of the Africans. Oral and written storytelling traditions have had a parallel development, and in many ways they have influenced each other. So at this point in time, it is being said that the oral and written storytelling traditions of the Africans have parallel, meaning they have been developing over time in the same manner, if what I said was correct. Okay, so now ancient Egyptian scribes, early Hausa and Swahili copyists, memorizers, and the contemporary writers of popular novellas have been the obvious and crucial transitional figures in the movement from oral to literary traditions. So now at this point in time, this slide mentioned about the people who are involved in the movement of these traditions of the Africans. All right. So now, what happened among the Hausa and the Swahili was occurring elsewhere in Africa, among the Fulani, northern Ghana, among the Guang, in Senegal, among the Tukulor and Wolof, and in Madagascar and Somalia. As is the case with the oral tradition, written literature is a combination of the real and the fantastic. It combines the real, or which is the contemporary world and history, the realistic world of the past, and on the other, myth and hero, with metaphor being the agent of transformation. So it is said here the word metaphor, which was it was used as the agent of transformation at that time. So this is the alchemy of the literary experience. Literature is atomized, fragmented history. Transformation is the crucial activity of the story, its dynamic movement. The writer is examining the relationship of the reader with the world and with history. In the process of this examination, the writer invents characters and events that correspond to the history but are not history. Okay, take note of that, okay? At the center of the story is myth, the fantasy element, a character or event that moves beyond reality, though it's always rooted in the real, okay? In the moral tale, this is clearly the fantasy character, so it is in a complex, refracted way in written literature. Okay, so at this point in time, we are going to talk about the influence of oral traditions on modern writers. So at this point, so based on the word itself, we're going to talk about what are the influences of the oral traditions during that time on the Africans modern writers, or not only on the African, but somehow maybe in our literature as well. But we'll see, okay? Themes in the literary traditions of the contemporary Africa are worked out frequently within the structures laid down by the imported religions, Christianity and Islam. Within the struggle between traditional and modern, between rural and newly urban, between genders, and between generations. Okay, so if you can see at the first part of the sentence, themes in the literary traditions of contemporary Africa are worked out frequently within the structures laid out by the imported religions, Christianity and Islam. So it has been shown here that the two religions, which was named as Christianity and Islam, played a huge role in spreading this influence to the other people and generations in as you can see, between rural and urban, between genders, between generations. Okay. The oral tradition is clearly evident in the popular literature of the marketplace and the major urban centers, created by literary storytellers who are manipulating the original materials much as oral storytellers do, while at the same time remaining faithful to the tradition. So we all know that every time we are trying to pass on to something, we are trying to, because since it is said that these are oral traditions, then basically these are just words of the mouth. So since it's just a word of the mouth, then of course there will be some manipulations that's going to occur. So that so for example, okay, for example, you know, when people like to talk about things, especially if it's about other people, people like to gossip, people like to talk about other people. So whenever people try to spread an information about someone, it will be altered. If you know what I mean, it will be altered, or there will be a manipulation on the information that is going to be passed down from different person to another person. Okay, so for example, if I don't know, enough of the examples. Basically speaking, um, what do people have at this point in time? Okay, it's really impossible for it to do not have any manipulations in it. So basically that's the side of the story. Next, some of the early writers sharpened their writing abilities by translating works into African languages. Others collected oral tradition. Most experienced their apprenticeships in one way or another within the context of living oral traditions. Okay, so it is said here that some of the early writers sharpened their writing abilities by translating works into African languages. Of course, basically, you'll see that these early writers, maybe you could conclude that they came from African because they have sharpened their writing abilities by translating the works into African languages. Or maybe if they're not local, they're trying to study the African languages. That's why they did that. So, yeah. While others collected oral tradition, most experienced their apprenticeships in one way or another within the context of living oral traditions. Okay, so here are the literatures in African languages. Ethiopian literature is composed in several languages: Ge'ez, Amharic, Tigrinya, Tigre, Ormo, and Harari. Most of the literature in Ethiopia has been Ge'ez. I don't know if that's how you read it, okay? And Amharic. Please correct me if I'm wrong. The classical language is Ge'ez, but over time, Ge'ez literature became the domain of a small portion of the population. The more common spoken language, Amharic, became widespread when it was used for political or religious purposes to reach a larger part of the population. So, guys, as you can see, these languages or literatures are being used differently by these people. So, for example, if we're going to compare that to our language right now, so a lot of us Filipinos are using Tagalogs here in Luzon, okay? Here in Luzon or here in the middle part of Luzon. But in other places here in the Philippines, they are using different languages. So, this is a simple analogy on how these literatures in African languages were spread. So, they have been using these languages based on their own maybe needs, if that's how we could say it. But yeah, basically, since they have been using these literatures and languages for different purposes, then maybe maybe this is the reason why some people adopted it, some people learned how to use it, or some people knows about it. Okay. Okay. The first Hausa novels were the outcome of a competition organized by the Translation Bureau in northern Nigeria in 1933. A year later, the Bureau released Muhammadu Bello's Gandoki, a novel in which the protagonist, Gandoki, fights the British colonial rule. Bello accomplishes in Gandoki what many other authors in Africa were doing at that time. He explores with the form and topic. His novel combines the Hausa oral tradition with the novel to create a heroic cycle inspired plot that also includes a strong thread of Islamic history. However, dic- dictatic components are poorly interjected, substantially diluting Gandoki's aesthetic quality, as often happened in other similarly experimental African novels. Bello's efforts, however, would eventually give rise to a more sophisticated Hausa book writing tradition. Amos Tutola's English language novel, The Palm Wine Drinkyard, would be the most successful representation of his experimenting in 1952. So as you can see, different literary works have been spreading and I mean, influencing these people over time. So meaning to say, just like what's happening right now, if there's a trending movie or a trending script, it will go on for maybe a month, a year, and then people will continue to talk about it. People will continue to spread it, and then after a while, if a new book or a new story came, then the former story that's been trending or that's been being talked about will soon fade away, and then this new book or story will replace it, and then the cycle will continue. So that's what's going on in here. Islamic Hausa poetry was an extension of classical Arabic poetry. There was also secular poetry like As Abullahi, Danfodio's war song, Usman Danfodio, Abu Dhabi's older brother and the creator of the Fulani Empire in the first decade of the 19th century, authored Wallahi, or By God, a book about the clash between religion and present political reality. Hausa drama has been affected by the oral tradition. Amin Nukano, Abu Bakar Tunao, Alhaji Muhammad Sada, Adamo Dangogo, and Dauda Kano are among the dramatists. Litatafan Soyaya, or love novels, began to appear in 1980s.
So this is just the continuation of what we have been talking about a while ago.
Shona. Shona is a member of group of people inhabiting part of southern Africa, comprises over three-quarters of the population, the Zimbabwe, from South Africa, Zambia, and Mozambique. The historical novel Peso was the first literary work published on Shona by Solomon Moswario, published in 1956. Bernard G. Desero, Dodge the Broom, published in 1957, deals with the themes and dominate Shona prose writing. Murambewa Goridema, published in 1959 by Solomon. Murambewa Goridema, Murambewa, the son of Goridema. Murambewa Goridema was published in 1959. John Marang Gwanda, 1959, Who Goes Never Comes Back, a novel that is fake and effect of Western style education and the resulting alienation from traditional society. Cyber S. was 1962, If I Had Known, and Cyber S. Marimazira's Haitunga Mary, 1962, If I Have Known. Kenneth was I Love Her Unto Death, addressed the loss of traditional values through its emphasis on love and how desire to cultivate Christian ideas of love. Roeko and Tarimba embody a Christian's love. 2 is Company 3 is then published in 1963, An Attack on Lagumi. Hell Has No Fire, published in 1965. It is a woman completely evil and therefore a good and evil battle it out. You Shall Confess by Emmanuel F. Figuero, published in 1967, is a reprisal of traditional Shona concept of ancestral spirit. Somali. Somali is well known as the home country of the pirates who terrorized the key trades water near the Horn of Africa. Somali Wisdom, 1965 collection of traditional Somali stories recorded by Mushazi Ismail Galal. Life struggle and the spirit, both of them death and both of which dealt with a traditional past in a negative way. Traditional wisdom and stories by Abdul Gader Bhutan and Shikuyin. In the Somali or oral tradition, poetry is the major method of expression. The gabay, which is usually chant, and jiftu, which is also chanted and usually moody. The jigar, which is short and deals with war. Tradition, poetry is the major method of expression. The gabay, which is usually chant, and jiftu, which is also chanted and usually moody. The jigar, which is short and deals with war. Leopard Among the Women, published in 1968, is a drama has thrived in Somali and the oral tradition continues to have a dynamic influence. Sardin Soto. Sardin Soto. Soto or Sisoto is a Sardin Bantu language of the Soto-Sawana group, spoken primarily by the Basotho and Lesotho, where it is the national and official language by South Africa. Cosmon and the Stories of the Soto by Azariel M. Sexy, published in 1893. It is the first writer in the Sardin Soto language, collecting and publishing Soto oral tradition in Mekong. The Book of Stories of the Meeting of the Birds and the Lawsuit between Shifufu and Shiterapa, published in 1928. It is a popular animal fable, historical events which are the major theme in much early Soto literature. In the Dark Caves, published in 1946, and Senate Shushu and Mushushu, and Senate The Pride of Mushushu, published in 1954. This novel was written by Makchobani, deals with the incident that occurred during the reign of the Soto chief Mushushu. Murosi, the king of the Waphuti, published in 1948. It is a historical novel by Damani about Murosi and his dealings with the British. Mushushu and the Missionaries, written by Kaketla, was published in 1947, and the historical themes can be found in E.A.S. Swahili. Swahili literature is a traditional classified into two periods and genres, classical and current. Early historical writing include Tarikhea Fateh, the Faith Chronicle, which was reassembled by 19th century scholar from Omar al-Nabhani and covers events from the 13th to the 19th centuries. Kabahari Zalamu, the Lamu Chronicle, is another chronicle that focuses on the 18th and 19th centuries. Xhosa. Xhosa language, Xhosa formerly spelled Xhosa, a Bantu language spoken by 7 million people in South Africa, especially in Eastern Province. Netsikanas hymn, in early 19th century, earliest piece of Xhosa writing. History of the creation of Xhosa. Xhosa writing was centered on the Lovedale and Scott mission during the years 1844 and 1845. Equizi was created. It Isituniwa Sinyaga. It is the monthly messenger. Info Savatsundo and African Opinions was a newspaper edited by Javabu with help of John Bokwe. Iswe Lavanto, the People's Voice.
Yoruba, a child wanders further and further away from his home in a Yoruba oral tradition narrative. The youngster overcomes the hurdles posed by scary Oba kings in 3 kingdoms, each further away from the boy's home. With the help of a fantastical figure, a fox, the storyteller uses the fox to convey the boy's growing knowledge as he loses his innocence and matures into a man. This oral narrative serves as a foundation for Yoruba best-known work, as well as the language's most significant contribution to fiction, the Ogbuju Odenino Igbo, Eronmail, 1938. The Forest of the Thousand Demons by Fagunwa mixes fantasies and realistic picture, religious didacticism, and Bunyanesque allegory, all set in a frame plot. The Mirrors, The Thousand of and One Nights. The novel successfully blends the literary and oral forces at work among Yoruba artists of the period. Literature in European and European-derived language. Afrikaans. South Afrikaans literature can be considered in the perspective of either the Dutch or the South African literary tradition. Afrikaans literature will always be on the periphery in an African environment. As with the language, it is mired in the identity crisis precipitated by the fiercely defended political and cultural identity of the Dutch settlers who arrived in South Africa in 1652 and whose descendants, along with English-speaking whites, took control of the government in 1948, enshrining the infamous apartheid system in law that would not be repealed until the early 1990s. English. In Western Africa, early works in English include a Liberian book, Love in Ebony, a Western African romance published in 1932 by Charles Cooper, as well as Ghanaian pulp fiction such as J. Emilia's Promise and Fulfillment by Benny Bengor Blay, 1944. Was an earliest essay on the struggle between African and European civilization, as are Konadu Efua Sutherland and Kwesi Brew were among the first popular authors in Ghana. The palm wine drinkard and his dead palm wine tapster in the Dead's Town was written by Nigerian Amos Totula, 1952. Its construction revealing a clear linkage between the oral and the literary tradition. In it, the hero moves to the Dead's town to bring his tapster back to the land of the living. The elixir that the hero brings back from the land of the dead, however, is an egg that is death dealing as surely as it is life-giving. French. The work of the first African writers in French contains themes that continue to be present in this literature to this day. African tradition, French colonialism, and the physical and the spiritual displacement of Africans from their native tradition attempts to blend French and African traditions and post-independence efforts to piece together the shards of African tradition and the French colonial experience into a new reality are all themes explored. Portuguese. In Cape Verdean literature in Portuguese, the connection and conflicts between Portugal and Cape Verde are extensively examined. The idea of escaping appears in a few of the poems. Poets like Jose Lopez da Silva highlight Europe throughout the classical period of Cape Verdean literature, which spanned the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Nationalistic poetry was written by Honorio Leite and Mario Pinto. Other early poets include Pedro Montero Cardoso, who published Jardim das Hesperides in 1926, and Eugenio Tavares, who was one of the first Cape Verdean writers to publish in Criollo. Antonio Pedro produced by Bizarre Poetry book in 1926. They were divided in two groups, Europe and Africa, as well as Portuguese and Criollo, and Portuguese Criollo spoken in the islands. Brazil was expected to play an important role as well.